Hello and welcome, dear friends. Today's story comes from the files of criminal security in South Africa. The Breda family was one of the wealthiest families, living in one of the most upscale neighborhoods in South Africa, and they also owned major businesses in Australia. Despite living in a home fortified with the latest alarms and anti-theft systems, on January 27, 2015, the family was attacked by someone wielding an axe. As a result, the father, mother, and their eldest son were killed, while their daughter sustained severe injuries, and their son Henry was left with minor wounds and was unconscious. 3 hours later, Henry regained consciousness and called emergency services, reporting that his family had been attacked with an axe. When the operator asked him if they were alive, he replied that he didn't think so, but mentioned that his sister was still moving. When the police arrived, they found Henry sitting outside the house with minor injuries and his clothes covered in blood. Inside, they discovered a massacre with blood running down the stairs. A paramedic later described it as the worst scene he had witnessed in his career. Henry and his sister were then taken to the hospital. Marley, Henry's sister, was in a coma due to severe head injuries. The investigation determined that the attack was carried out using both an axe and a knife, weapons that seemed to have been taken from inside the house, since there were no signs of forced entry. It was also clear that the family was the direct target of the attack, as nothing had been stolen from the home despite their wealth. Once Henry's condition stabilized, the police began questioning him. They asked how the attacker entered the house despite the heavy security, to which Henry replied that they might have left the back door open. He also claimed that he had been in the bathroom when he heard screaming. He rushed out and saw a stranger, a tall black man dressed in black clothing, wearing a mask and gloves, laughing loudly as he attacked. Henry said he also heard other voices outside before being hit and losing consciousness. He explained how he got injured and passed out. When the police asked Henry whether the family's dogs had barked at the attackers, he said they hadn't. Upon examining Henry's phone, the police discovered that he had called his girlfriend an hour after the attack, then searched for emergency numbers, but only called the emergency services 3 hours after the attack. Henry told the police that he had called his girlfriend and then fainted again from the horror of what he had seen. Investigators tried to gather any information from his sister Marley, but she was suffering from temporary memory loss due to the trauma. After Henry and Marley recovered, Marley went to live with her uncle, while Henry moved in with his girlfriend. The uncle confirmed that the family had no known enemies. The police investigation continued for 3 years. They found it strange that the attacker hadn't brought his own weapons, choosing instead to use items from the house. If the family was specifically targeted, wouldn't it make sense for the assailant to come prepared with their own tools? The brutality of the attack led investigators to suspect that this was a crime driven by revenge. Moreover, why would the attacker leave Henry alive? And why hadn't the dogs barked? Forensic analysis revealed another clue. The eldest son had been killed while sitting on his bed, without putting up any resistance, suggesting he knew the attacker. It was also evident that all the strikes were made by the same person with consistent force. In September 2016, the police arrested Henry and his girlfriend while they were driving, on charges of drug possession. Through further investigations, they learned that Henry was a former drug addict who had been treated in rehab by his family. After extensive investigations and contradictions in Henry's statements, the police asked him about the dogs again. They even conducted tests on the dogs, which showed that they had not been drugged or silenced, despite the fact that the family dogs always barked at strangers. In May 2018, Henry was sentenced to life in prison for murdering his family, along with an additional 15 years for the attempted murder of his sister. The motive behind the crime was that Henry's family had discovered he had relapsed into drug addiction after completing treatment, and his father had threatened to cut him off financially unless he quit his addiction. But instead of stopping, Henry decided to take revenge on his family in the most horrific way, thinking he would become the sole heir to their fortune. In the end, his plan was uncovered, and the drugs that controlled him led him to eliminate the people closest to him. In conclusion, I hope everyone can reflect on the lessons from this story. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all our latest content.